Today, we'll listen to a touching tale from the American frontier, where a lone cowboy's honorable act toward a fallen enemy challenges his deepest beliefs about respect, dignity, and understanding across cultural divides. It was the summer of 1885 in the sprawling, sun-scorched territory of West Texas. The air hung heavy with heat, causing mirages to dance across the distant horizon where the blue sky met the golden earth. Sam Thornton wiped the sweat from his brow as he guided his chestnut mare through the rocky terrain of Palo Duro Canyon. At 43, Sam's weathered face told the story of a man who had seen his fair share of hardship. His eyes, blue as the Texas sky, remained vigilant as he scanned the surrounding cliffs. Sam had been a cowboy most of his life, working for the Circle B Ranch for the past 15 years. The ranch owner, Thomas Blackwood, trusted Sam implicitly to manage the cattle drives and keep the peace in increasingly complicated times. As settlement expanded westward, tensions between ranchers and the native Comanche people had intensified. Sam understood the complexity of the situation more than most. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he harbored no outright hatred toward the Comanche. His views had been shaped by years of observation and the occasional, albeit limited, peaceful interaction. The canyon was unnaturally quiet that afternoon. Even the birds seemed to have sought shelter from the relentless sun. Sam's mare, Penny, suddenly tensed beneath him, her ears pricking forward. Years of frontier living had taught Sam to trust his horse's instincts. He reached for his Winchester rifle, scanning the ridgeline above. That's when he spotted them, 3 Comanche warriors observing him from the canyon rim. Their silhouettes stood stark against the bright sky, mounted on their painted ponies. Sam didn't raise his rifle, but kept his hand steady on it. The warriors made no aggressive moves, simply watching. After a tense moment, they disappeared. Over the ridge. "Steady, girl," Sam murmured to Penny, who snorted nervously. "They're just checking their territory. Can't blame them for that." As dusk approached, Sam made camp in a small clearing near a spring. He built a modest fire, boiled coffee in his dented tin pot, and prepared a simple meal of beans and jerky. The encounter with the Comanche warriors lingered in his mind. Unlike most white settlers who saw them only as savage obstacles to progress, Sam recognized their struggle to preserve their way of life against the unstoppable tide of westward expansion. His thoughts were interrupted by a distant sound, something between a moan and a whisper carried on the evening breeze. Sam doused his fire and listened. The sound came again, more distinct this time, a human voice in pain. With caution, born from experience, Sam took his rifle and followed the sound. In the small ravine about 50 yards from his camp, he found a young Comanche warrior lying on his side. Blood soaked through the man's buckskin shirt from what appeared to be a gunshot wound to his chest. Beside him lay a broken-tipped spear and a small medicine pouch. The warrior, who couldn't have been more than 25, tensed as Sam approached. His hand moved instinctively toward a knife at his waist, but he lacked the strength to draw it. Pain and defiance mingled in his dark eyes. "I ain't here to hurt you, son," Sam said softly, setting his rifle down as a gesture of peace. And he knelt beside the wounded man and examined the injury. The bullet had entered just below the warrior's right collarbone. From the amount of blood and the warrior's labored breathing, Sam knew the wound was fatal. The young Comanche spoke a few words in his native tongue, his voice surprisingly steady despite his condition. Sam shook his head. "Don't understand your words, friend, but I understand your situation." Sam retrieved his canteen and held it to the warrior's lips. After a moment's hesitation, the man drank. Water trickled down his chin as he coughed weakly. His eyes, though clouded with pain, held a question that transcended language barriers. "Name's Sam," he said, touching his chest. "Samuel Thornton." The warrior seemed to understand the introduction. He touched his own chest weakly. "Tabananika," he said. "It means sun hawk." Sam nodded, surprised at the warrior's use of English to translate his name. "Rest easy, sun hawk. I'll stay with you." As night fell over the canyon, Sam kept vigil beside the dying warrior. He built a small fire to ward off the desert chill and covered Sunhawk with his own blanket. The young Comanche drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring words in his native language. During brief moments of lucidity, he would look at Sam with an expression that mixed confusion and gratitude. In one such moment, Sunhawk reached for his medicine pouch with trembling fingers. He withdrew a small object wrapped in soft leather and pressed it into Sam's rough palm. Sam carefully unwrapped it to reveal a carved stone bear no larger than a walnut. "Protector," Sunhawk whispered, "for one who shows honor to enemy." The gesture moved Sam deeply. "I don't see you as my enemy, son," he replied. Softly, just before dawn, Sunhawk's breathing became shallow. He gripped Sam's wrist with surprising strength and spoke his final words clearly. "Bury me, facing east, where sun rises." Sam nodded solemnly. "You have my word." When the first light of dawn painted the canyon walls in shades of amber and gold, Sunhawk drew his last breath. Sam closed the warrior's eyes with gentle fingers, feeling an unexpected sense of loss for a man he had known for only a few hours. True to his promise, Sam buried Sunhawk on a small rise facing east. He dug the grave using a small folding shovel he carried for emergencies, lining it with stones he gathered from the canyon floor. He placed Sunhawk's body in the grave with dignity, positioning him to face the rising sun as requested. He laid the broken spear alongside the warrior and placed the medicine pouch on his chest. "Are you enjoying our story? Tell us where. You're watching our videos from? Leave your city in the comments and let us know what kind of stories you enjoy most. Suggest a tale you'd like us to tell next time. And now, let's continue with our narrative." As Sam covered the grave with earth and stones, he reflected on the strange circumstances that had brought him and Sunhawk together. Two men from different worlds, raised to view each other with suspicion and fear, had found a moment of understanding in death that might never have been possible in life. After completing the burial, Sam fashioned a crude marker from two sticks bound together in the shape of a cross. He knew it wasn't the Comanche way, but it was the only marker he knew how to make. As an afterthought, he tied a strip of his red bandana to the cross, a color he'd seen Comanche warriors wear with pride. "Safe journey, Sunhawk," Sam said, removing his hat briefly in respect. "May you find good hunting grounds wherever you're headed." When Sam returned to the Circle B ranch 2 days later, he found the ranch in a state of tension. A group of settlers from the nearby town of Amarillo had arrived, led by a hard-faced man named Jeremiah Colt. Colt owned the general store in town and had appointed himself the unofficial leader of the community's defense against Indian raids. "Thornton," Thomas Blackwood called as Sam dismounted in the ranch yard. "These men are forming a militia. There was a raid on the Wilson homestead yesterday. Took their horses and burned the barn." Colt stepped forward, his hand resting on the revolver at his hip. "We tracked the savages to Palo Duro. Found one of them shot. Must have been Wilson's doing. But the body was gone this morning. Buried, looks like." His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You been out that way, ain't you, Thornton?" Sam met the man's gaze steadily. "Ooh, I have. You see anything unusual? Any Indians?" Sam could feel the small stone bear in his pocket, a weight that seemed suddenly heavier. "Saw some tracks. Nothing unusual for that territory." Colt studied Sam's face, clearly unsatisfied. With the answer, "Well, we're forming a party to hunt down the rest of that raiding party. Blackwood says you know the canyon better than most. We could use your skills." Sam looked to Blackwood, who gave him a slight nod. The ranch owner was a fair man who generally avoided conflict with the native tribes, but he also had to maintain relations with the townspeople who bought his cattle. "I'll help track," Sam said carefully, "but I don't hunt men who are just trying to survive in what little land they have left." Colt's face darkened. "These aren't men, Thornton. They're savages who'd scalp you as soon as look at you." Sam felt anger rise in his chest, but kept his voice level. "I've known white men just as savage, Mr. Colt, sometimes more so." Before Colt could respond, Blackwood intervened. "Sam's the best tracker we have. We do this my way, or not at all on my land." Reluctantly, Colt backed down. The search party would leave at dawn the next day, with Sam serving as the primary tracker. That night, alone in his sparse quarters in the bunkhouse, Sam examined the stone bear Sunhawk had given him. The carving was simple but skillful, with clear attention to the animal's powerful form. It represented something sacred to the Comanche, though Sam didn't fully understand its significance. The next morning, a group of 12 men set out for Palo Duro Canyon. Sam led them on a deliberately circuitous route, one that would give any Comanche in the area ample time to move deeper into the canyon's network of ravines and hideaways. He had no intention of leading Colt and his trigger-happy militia to a confrontation. By midday, they reached the site where Sam had buried Sunhawk. The crude cross still stood, the strip of red bandana fluttering in the breeze. Sam tensed as Colt dismounted and approached the grave. "This is fresh," Colt said, kicking at the stone-covered mound. "Who would bury an Indian with a Christian cross?" "Someone with respect for the dead," Sam replied, his hand instinctively moving to his pocket where the stone bear rested. Colt turned to Sam, suspicion clear in his eyes. "Was it you, Thornton? Did you bury this savage?" Before Sam could answer, one of the younger men in the party called out, "Riders coming up on the ridge." All eyes turned to the canyon rim, where a group of Comanche warriors had appeared, at least 20 of them, led by an older man wearing an elaborate headdress. They made no aggressive moves, simply watching the white men below. "It's an ambush!" Colt shouted, reaching for his rifle. "Hold!" Sam commanded with unexpected authority. "They're not here to fight. Look at how they're positioned, out in the open, making no move to surround us." Indeed, the warriors remained stationary, their expressions solemn as they gazed down at the gravesite. The leader raised his hand in what appeared to be a gesture of acknowledgement. Sam, acting on instinct, removed his hat and nodded back. After a long, tense moment, the Comanche leader made a gesture to his warriors, and they turned their horses and disappeared over the ridge. "What in God's name was that about?" one of the ranchers asked, his voice shaking slightly. Sam looked down at Sunhawk's grave. "I believe they came to honor their dead, and maybe to see who honored him as well." Colt spat on the ground. "This is ridiculous. We're here to hunt down raiders, not attend an Indian funeral." "Those weren't raiders," Sam said with certainty. "That was Quanah Parker himself, one of the last great Comanche chiefs. He wouldn't lead a small raid on a homestead. He's too smart for that." "How the hell would you know?" Colt demanded. "Because I've seen him before, at a peace talk in Fort Sill 3 years ago," Sam replied. "And because the man buried here was wearing this." He pulled a small woven bracelet from his pocket, something he had removed from Sunhawk's wrist before burial, but had not mentioned until now. "It marks him as part of Parker's band." The revelation created a stir among the search party. Quanah Parker was well known even among the white settlers, a half-white, half-Comanche leader who was respected and feared in equal measure. If Parker's band was in the area, a small militia like theirs would be severely outmatched. "The Wilson raid must have been carried out by a different group," Sam continued. "Or maybe it wasn't Comanche at all. Could have been Kiowa or..." even white rustlers using Indian tactics to throw off pursuit. The suggestion that white men might be responsible for the raid did not sit well with Colt, but others in the party seemed willing to consider it. After a heated discussion, Blackwood made the decision to return to the ranch. "We're not equipped to take on Parker's warriors, and I won't risk my men on a fool's errand," he declared, overriding Colt's objections. As the party prepared to leave, Sam lingered by Sunhawk's grave. He felt a connection to this place now, a sense that something significant had occurred here beyond the simple act of burying a fallen warrior. Back at the ranch, tensions continued to simmer. Colt and his supporters returned to town, dissatisfied with the outcome of their expedition. Sam, meanwhile, found himself increasingly isolated. Word had spread that he had buried a Comanche. Warriors and many of the ranch hands viewed this act with suspicion or outright hostility. Only Thomas Blackwood seemed to understand. The ranch owner called Sam to his house that evening, offering him a rare glass of good whiskey. "You did a decent thing out there, Sam," Blackwood said, as they sat on his porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mesas in shades of purple and gold. Not many would show that kind of respect to an enemy. "He wasn't my enemy," Sam replied, rolling the glass between his palms. "Just a young man dying far from his people." "Seemed like the human thing to do," Blackwood nodded thoughtfully. "And my father fought the Comanche for 30 years, hated them with every fiber of his being, but in his last years he told me something I never forgot. He said, 'The greatest tragedy of this conflict is that we never truly tried to understand each other until it was too late.'" Sam took a sip of whiskey, letting the warm liquid linger on his tongue. "Maybe it's still not too late." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a ranch hand named Jenkins, who burst onto the porch with alarm evident on his face. "Mr. Blackwood, Indians at the north boundary, at least a dozen of them." Both men rose immediately. "Are they armed for war?" Blackwood asked sharply. Jenkins shook his head. "Don't appear to be. They're just sitting their horses at the fence line. Their leader asked for the man who honors the dead." Sam and Blackwood exchanged glances. Without a word, they saddled their horses and rode to the north boundary, accompanied by several nervous ranch hands armed with rifles. As they approached, Sam could see the group of Comanche warriors waiting patiently. At their head was the same chief he had seen at the canyon, Quanah Parker. Sam rode slightly ahead of the others. Stopping about 20 yards from the boundary fence, Parker urged his horse forward until they faced each other across the barrier. "You buried Tabananica," Parker said in clear, accented English. "Oh, to my sister's son." Sam nodded solemnly. "I found him wounded, stayed with him until he passed, buried him facing east, as he asked." Parker's expression remained impassive, but his eyes reflected a complex mix of emotions. "Why would a white man show such respect to a Comanche?" "Because all men deserve dignity and death," Sam replied simply, "and because your nephew faced his end with courage." Parker was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, "Tabananica was not on a raid. He was returning from a vision quest when he encountered white men who shot without warning." Sam nodded, having suspected as much. "I believe you." "The world is changing," Parker continued. "The old ways are fading like mist in morning sun. Soon my people must walk new paths or perish." He reached into a pouch at his waist and withdrew an object, a necklace of intricate beadwork with a small pendant of carved bone. "Tabananica's mother sends this. For the man who gave her son honorable passage to the spirit world." He extended the necklace across the fence. Sam hesitated only briefly before accepting it with both hands, a gesture of respect. "Tell her I'm honored," Sam said, "and that her son died bravely." Parker nodded once. "There is a council fire in One Moon at Medicine Mounds. The White Father from Washington sends men to speak of reservation. If men of honor like you were there, perhaps words would be true ones." With that cryptic invitation, Parker raised his hand in farewell. The Comanche warriors turned their horses and rode away, disappearing into the gathering dusk. Blackwood moved his horse alongside Sam's. What was that about? Sam watched the horizon where the warriors had vanished. I believe I've just been invited to a peace council. The news of Sam's encounter with Quanah Parker spread quickly through the territory. Some viewed it with hope, others with suspicion and outright hostility. Jeremiah Colt was among the latter, publicly denouncing Sam as an Indian sympathizer who couldn't be trusted. But Thomas Blackwood stood firmly behind his foreman, even when pressure mounted from some of the neighboring ranchers. In the weeks that followed, Sam found himself in the uncomfortable position of reluctant diplomat. The territorial governor, hearing of his unusual connection to Parker, requested that he attend the upcoming council at Medicine Mounds as an unofficial observer. The army captain stationed at Fort Elliott sought his advice on Comanche customs and protocol. Through it all, Sam carried the stone bear in his pocket and wore the beaded necklace beneath his shirt. They served as constant reminders of Sun, Hawk, and the promise of understanding that had emerged from their brief encounter. When the day of the council arrived, Sam rode to Medicine Mounds alongside Captain Garrett of Fort Elliott and a government Indian agent named Hollister. The sacred mounds rose from the prairie like sentinels, their rounded forms visible for miles. At their base, a large Comanche encampment spread out, dozens of teepees arranged in a great circle with hundreds of horses grazing nearby. As they approached, a delegation rode out to meet them, led by Quanah Parker himself. The chief wore a mixture of traditional Comanche clothing and items of white origin, a visual representation of his mixed heritage and his position between two worlds. "The man who honors the dead comes as promised," Parker said, addressing Sam directly. "This is good." The council lasted for 3 days. Sam watched as government representatives outlined their proposals for moving the remaining free Comanche to the reservation at Fort Sill. He listened as tribal elders voiced their concerns and objections. He observed Parker's skilled navigation of both worlds, extracting concessions while recognizing the inevitable direction of history. On the final evening, as council fires burned low, Parker invited Sam to sit with him away from the main gathering. They shared a pipe in silence before the chief finally spoke. "Now you carry my nephew's spirit stone," he said, gesturing to the bulge in Sam's shirt pocket where the stone bear rested. Sam nodded, withdrawing the carving. "He gave it to me before he died, called it a protector." Parker smiled faintly. "It is that, but it is also a burden. To carry another's spirit stone is to carry responsibility for their unfinished path." "I'm not sure I understand," Sam admitted. "Tabernanica was to be a bridge between our peoples," Parker explained. "He learned the white man's tongue, studied your ways at the mission school. His path was to help guide our people through the coming changes." The chief looked directly into Sam's eyes. "Now that path falls to you." Sam felt the weight of the chief's words. "I'm just a cowboy, Chief Parker, not a leader or a diplomat." "Yet here you sit at a council of nations," Parker replied, "because you saw my nephew not as enemy, but as man. That is beginning of wisdom that both our peoples need." The conversation marked a turning point in Sam's life. When he returned to the Circle B ranch, he carried not only the stone bear and the beaded necklace, but also a new sense of purpose. With Blackwood's blessing, he began to serve as an unofficial liaison between the ranch and the Comanche reservation, helping to resolve disputes over strayed cattle and access to water holes. Not everyone approved of Sam's new role. Jeremiah Colt and his supporters continued to view him with suspicion, and on more than one occasion, Sam found himself unwelcome in certain establishments in Amarillo. But there were others, both white settlers and Comanche, who recognized the value of having someone who could walk in both worlds. In the autumn of 1886, as golden light bathed the prairie in warm hues, Sam rode once again to the spot in Palo Duro Canyon where he had buried Sunhawk. The crude cross had weathered but still stood, and someone, presumably Comanche visitors, had placed offerings of tobacco and small carved figures around the grave. Sam dismounted and stood beside the grave, removing his hat. "Never thought burying you would change the course of my life, Sunhawk," he said quietly. "But here we are." He placed a small carved wooden horse, a gift from a Comanche child he had befriended, on the grave. As he did so, he noticed movement on the canyon rim. A lone figure on horseback watched him from above. Though too distant to identify clearly, Sam somehow knew it was Quanah Parker, keeping his own vigil for his fallen nephew. Sam raised his hand in greeting. After a moment, the figure returned the gesture before turning and riding away along the canyon rim. The west was changing rapidly. The great buffalo herds were gone, the open range was giving way to barbed wire, and the proud Comanche nation was adapting to life on the reservation. But in that moment, standing by the grave of a young warrior who had briefly bridged two worlds, Sam Thornton found himself hopeful that understanding might yet grow from the seeds of respect planted in difficult soil. He mounted Penny and turned her toward the ranch, the stone bear a comforting weight in his pocket. The sun was setting behind him, casting his shadow long before him on the trail ahead, a trail that would lead him between two worlds for many years to come. The weeks that followed brought unexpected changes to Sam's routine. Word of his encounter with the Comanche spirits had spread through the reservation, carried by Windwalker and the other tribal members who had witnessed the ceremony. What surprised Sam most was how the story had also reached the ears of other ranchers and townspeople in the area. Some reactions were predictably hostile. At the general store in Millerville, Sam overheard Jake Morrison, a neighboring rancher, telling anyone who would listen that Thornton's gone soft, talking to ghosts and treating them savages like they're civilized folk. The criticism stung, but Sam found he cared less about such opinions than he once might have. More surprising were the ranchers who approached him with quiet curiosity. Old Pete Hendricks, whose spread bordered the reservation, pulled Sam aside after church one Sunday morning. "Unheard tell you had some kind of experience out there," Pete said, his weathered face serious. "Been having some strange things happen on my land lately. Cattle acting spooked for no reason, finding offerings left by my waterholes. My foreman thinks it's just coincidence, but—" He trailed off, looking uncertain. Sam studied the older man's face, recognizing the same confusion he'd felt before his own encounter. "What kind of offerings?" "Small things. Feathers. And stones arranged in patterns, sometimes tobacco tied in little bundles. Always near water sources or high ground." Pete shifted uncomfortably. "I've been removing them. Figured it was trespassing or some such. But after hearing your story, maybe you should leave them be," Sam suggested carefully. "From what I've learned, they're not meant as threats, more like requests for permission or thanks for sharing the land." Pete nodded slowly. "Windwalker mentioned something similar when I asked him about it, said his people have always left such gifts, even before the reservation, part of their way of showing respect to the land and its spirits." This conversation led to others. Sam found himself becoming an unofficial mediator between the ranching community and the reservation, helping to explain cultural practices that had long been misunderstood. He learned that many of the mysterious incidents reported by ranchers were actually traditional Comanche practices, continuing despite the boundaries imposed by the reservation system. The stone bear in his pocket had become a constant companion, and Sam often found himself touching it during difficult conversations or moments of uncertainty. It seemed to provide a connection not just to the spirits he'd encountered, but to a deeper understanding of the land itself. One evening in late autumn, as Sam was checking his fence line near the reservation boundary, he encountered a group of young Comanche men on horseback. They were led by a warrior he didn't recognize, but their body language suggested tension, rather than hostility. "You are the one called Thornton," the leader said in accented but clear English, "the one who honored Running Bear." Sam nodded, his hand instinctively moving to the stone bear. I am Spotted Hawk, cousin to Running Bear. I have come to ask something of you." The young warrior's eyes were intense, searching. "Our elders speak of your vision, of the spirits who accepted your offering. But there are some among our people who doubt. They say no white man can truly understand our ways, that the spirits would not reveal themselves to an outsider." Sam felt the weight of the moment. "What would you have me do?" "Come with us to the sacred canyon where Running Bear was. Born. If the spirits truly accept you, they will make themselves known there as well. If not," Spotted Hawk shrugged, "then we will know the truth." The request was both an honor and a challenge. Sam understood that his answer would affect not just his own relationship with the Comanche people, but potentially the fragile peace that had been building between the communities. "When?" he asked simply. "Tomorrow, at dawn. Bring only yourself and your horse. The spirits will provide what else is needed." That night, Sam barely slept. He found himself thinking about Running Bear, about the vision by the grave, about the responsibility that seemed to have been placed on his shoulders. As the first light of dawn crept across the sky, he saddled Penny and rode to the meeting place. The sacred canyon was a hidden gem in the harsh landscape, its walls carved by centuries of wind and water into fantastic shapes that seemed to shift and change in the changing light. Ancient pictographs decorated the rock faces, telling stories in symbols Sam couldn't read but somehow felt he understood. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything Sam had experienced. The Comanche warriors created a circle, with Sam seated at its center. They chanted in their native language, their voices rising and falling like the wind through the canyon walls. Smoke from burning sage and sweetgrass filled the air, creating an otherworldly atmosphere. As the sun reached its zenith, Sam felt the familiar tingling sensation he'd experienced at Running Bear's grave. The air seemed to thicken, and the canyon walls began to shimmer. Then, as clearly as if they were standing before him, Sam saw them, not just Running Bear, but dozens of Comanche spirits, warriors and women and children, all watching him with expressions of solemn approval. Among them stood an elderly man whose presence commanded immediate respect. Without words, Sam understood this was Running Bear's grandfather, a great chief whose wisdom had guided the tribe for generations. The spirit chief nodded once, a gesture that seemed to encompass acceptance, blessing, and responsibility all at once. When the vision faded and the ceremony ended, Spotted Hawk and the other warriors looked at Sam with new respect. "The spirits have spoken," Spotted Hawk said quietly. "You are welcome among us, Bridgewalker between worlds." The title, Bridgewalker, stuck, and Sam found his role in the community evolving once again. He began spending time on the reservation, learning Comanche customs and language, while also helping tribal members navigate the complex relationships with their white neighbors. The stone bear remained his constant companion, but now it was joined by other gifts from his new Comanche friends. An eagle feather from Windwalker, a medicine pouch from Spotted Hawk, and eventually a Comanche name, Tsinavo, which meant one who honors the dead. As winter approached, Sam reflected on how much his life had changed since that day he'd found Running Bear's body. What had begun as a simple act of human decency had opened doors to understanding he'd never imagined possible. The frontier was still harsh and unforgiving, but it no longer seemed quite so lonely. Standing on his porch one evening, watching, The sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Sam touched the stone bear in his pocket and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve as a bridge between worlds that had been separated by fear and misunderstanding for too long. The spirits had chosen him for this role, and he would honor that trust for as long as he drew breath.